Chapter 10 is our last SAGE chapter we'll cover in this book. Not that the others are not important. Chapter 11 is job costing. Chapter 12 is partnerships and corporations. But at this point, we got to worry about net solutions and getting that completed. So we stop at chapter 10. It's our payroll chapter. And most clients, most small companies are scared of payroll because of all the paperwork and the taxes. So most companies do what? They outsource their payroll to ADP or some of those payroll services, or accounting firms. They do them also. So, but we still should have an understanding of the forms or some of the filing requirements associated with Wisconsin payrolls. So what I did hand out to you are some Wisconsin payroll reports. I want to identify them first before we start. One of the documents I gave you was a UCT 101 report, which is Wisconsin's unemployment report. So let's just take a look at that first. It looks like this. There's actually 2 pages to it. And you'll see the word quarterly on the top, right? So it's made for every quarter. There's 4 quarters in a year. And we also have to identify by month in that quarter, the 12th day, don't ask me why 12, but on that 12th day, how many employees did I have? After that, gross wages. What do I mean when I say the word gross?
Before taxes.
Before taxes, right? I've seen a lot of students put in net pay here. So we want the gross wages. However, right, in the state of Wisconsin, we only pay, this is an employer tax only. We only pay up to our wages to what level? 14,000. So, I always hated to pay this tax in the first quarter. Why? Because it was a huge number. The tax was huge. Why is the tax huge in the first quarter? Many of my employees did not reach the wage cap yet, of 14,000. So I was always thankful by the third quarter, most of my employees had reached the 14, and then this tax got really small at that point. So what is the goal of unemployment from payroll? Why am I paying this tax in as the employer? What's the purpose of the money?
Just in case something happened and they can't work, so there's money to actually pay them.
Yeah, that's when, if I do lay you off, right, you can go to the Department of Workforce Development and collect unemployment because it comes out of your fund. So that's why hiring, right, is so very important. You got to hire the right person, and that person you want to stay. You don't want to lay them off, correct? Because if they lay off, if you lay them off, they're going to collect, and that influences what? Your tax rate. So if my bucket gets lower and lower, guess what? My tax rate goes up and up. So there's a huge incentive for employers to keep you, not to lay you off. All right. So that's kind of what we're dealing with here. And the state wants to know what? On the page 2, which employees? They have this all by employee, right? And they want the social security number, last name, first name, and again, what did you pay that person in that quarter? Whether it's above the limit or below, what did you pay them during that quarter? Above the 14 or below? Gross payroll always on page 2. Now, I gave you a paper copy of this report. You will never ever fill out a paper copy. You are going to the Department of Workforce Development website, right? Then you will just enter the numbers in. It's really a nice system because all of the employee information from the last quarter is pre-filled. So it makes it much easier to just plop in the gross pay they had in that quarter. And the state of Wisconsin also knows when the employee does what? When that employee reaches the 14, it automatically knows that. So it will put in their wages over the 14 in box 10. So that's another nice feature. Obviously your software will also do that for you. You tell the software what is the Wisconsin wage cap. It's 14,000. Once it knows that, it should compute the tax correctly for you. So what GL account do we have to match here? What's the control account name? What would you call it? Wisconsin, what is this report? Unemployment. Taxes. Payable. Again, it's a current liability, right? It sits with all your other payroll taxes. Wisconsin withholding, the IRS ones, federal withholding, Social Security, Medicare. Remember that all for payroll?
Yep.
So those will all be in this section. Now, this is an employer tax, right? Employees are not contributing to this amount. So on the general ledger, you will have a payroll tax expense. You will have a payroll tax expense for the taxes that you're paying into the state for unemployment purposes. So, when I issue a payroll to an employee, right, Sage will automatically debit, right, the expense, credit the liability for every employee based on until what? Until they hit the 14,000 wage cap. Then it stops. That's how unemployment works. My first job was to do voluntary contributions. Does anybody know what that means for unemployment? Voluntary contributions.
To lower your tax.
Yes, right. In October, right, November-ish, the State Department of Workforce Development sends to every employer what their new tax rate will be for next year. I've had clients throw that away. Okay. They don't realize what it is. So, comes to January, right? They're computing their tax maybe at a lower rate because they threw it away. And then when it comes to the first quarter, OMG, they owe more than what they thought, right? Because they threw the letter away. But anyway, so I can make a voluntary contribution to lower my tax rate if I want to. I can make more money in my fund. That was my first job at Shinner's. It was called Shinner's. It's called Shank now. Anyway, So the state gives you the rate. Department of Workforce Development gives you this rate every year. You put that rate in, it computes the tax, line 11 times line 12 on line 13. Here again, you cannot be late, don't be late. And then finally, the tax is due at the end, for the most part. The other report that I gave to you was this guy. At the end of the page, this guy. The WT6. And all I want you to know is, what is this report for? What does it say on the report? Withholding. So what GL account do I have here? Wisconsin. What do you think? Withholding? Tax payable. It's a payroll tax, right? So just like the Fed has a federal withholding tax payable, Wisconsin, we're also withholding each employee's income tax, right? We're collecting it so that at the end of the month, or end of the year, I'm sorry, hopefully they get a refund. That's the kind of the goal, right? So is there an expense with this to the company? Is there another GL account that I got to worry about? No expense. Right? I'm simply collecting the money off the employee's paycheck. I'm holding it, hence the name holding in it. And then what do I have to do? Pay it, right? If I'm an employer and I withhold it and I don't pay it to the state, am I in trouble? Big time. You don't mess with this one. This goes with number 2 of payments. Employees first, taxes second. This is number 2. You gotta pay this in. Okay? Don't be late. All right, and the state, like with sales tax, tells you how often. And those with large payrolls will pay monthly. Lesser payrolls could pay quarterly or annually. So it depends on the state. The state tells you how often. Here again, you will never fill this out ever in your life on paper. You will file it electronically, right? You go to what site now? Department of Revenue, not Department of Workforce Development. So there's 2 different sites, one for unemployment, one for revenue. The final report I gave to you was the good old 941. We had a whole chapter of this in payroll. Does anybody remember this form? Yeah. It's for which taxes? Federal. This is a quiz question. I'm going to give you one already. What taxes do I report on this form? Yep, Medicare, Social Security taxes, federal what? Income tax withheld. Those are the 3 taxes. The withheld amounts from the employee's paycheck, the employee and employer portion of Social Security and Medicare. Remember, there's 2. So there's 6.2 for employee I'm just doing the, and 6.2 on the employer. It's a matching, right? So remember what Social Security is? Social Security is for your retirement. Medicare is for what? What's Medicare for?
Medical.
Health care. Correct. Again, you will never fill this form out on paper. It's going to be done electronically in most cases. So that's the purpose of this form. The wage, the only one with a wage cap, does everybody know what I mean by wage cap? Social Security has a wage cap. I'll never hit it. There's just, I mean, it's 138,
No, 128, 400.
138, 400 now?
128,
128, 400,
400.
that was last year. 19 is bigger, I think.
It's bigger now, it's like one.
The same, maybe the type.
It's, it goes up every year.
Yeah, our book is
Oh,
passed, yeah. So every year it will probably go up.
Go up.
And eventually, because this retirement is running out of money, right, the wage cap will probably disappear. So we won't raise taxes, I like that, right? But we can change the wage cap. What does that do, Jack?
Keep
Raises
the,
taxes.
keep coming in.
Yeah. So, anyway, this form is filed how often?
Depend on how much.
No,
quarterly.
quarterly. It's the only, it's quarterly. Just like unemployment,
Yeah.
I don't care what amount you pay in, it's quarterly for unemployment, right? Also, with this report, come on page 2, right? Page 2, part 2 is a deposit schedule, right? Now, the IRS tells you basically how often you have to deposit. Guys, most of you will be here. These are the smaller payrolls. You will pay monthly, right? You have to pay monthly. 15th day following the month is when it's due, right? And larger companies will do what? With larger payrolls, have to pay semi-weekly. Semi-weekly. And there's a separate form called Schedule B that has the days of the month on it. And if you're below 2,500, you possibly could be in here. This is very small payrolls.
Like a mom and pop.
Yes. Yep. So if you are under 2,500 in withholding taxes, right, you could just check that box. You don't have to fill out any schedule. That's kind of nice. But everybody else will have to fill out a schedule, either monthly or semi-weekly. And what do we have to be sure of is that what we deposit for the quarter, right, matches line 12. Go back to your first page. Oh. Where's line 12? Or what does line 12 say?
Total taxes after adjustments and credits.
Yeah, right here. The IRS wants to be sure that you've made your deposits on time and for the full amount, right? Large penalties again if you don't make your deposits on time. So that's what they're trying to figure out here is whether you have depositing on time. And the goal here, what balance should I have? 0. You should not be paying any money in on this form. The deposits are due prior to this form. This form is due end of month, following quarter. End of month following the quarter. So basically, you got 30 days to get this form done. So January 31st is a big day in payroll. April 30th is a big day in payroll. July 31st is a big day in payroll. And then October 31st is a big day in payroll. It's 1 month following the quarter. January 31st is worse because you also got W-2s and everything else coming out. So it's a huge day, very stressful. Okay, so just realize the report number, 941, WT6, UCT 101. On my notes for chapter 10, UCT 101, WT6, Form 941. Those are the three I also not only want for the case, but I also want for the Net Solutions project. Those three reports come with the Net Solutions project as well. They're the predominant main ones that we have to be worried about, both Wisconsin and federal. Now, there is a WT7, W2, W3. Does everybody know what a W2 is?
Yes.
Yeah, that's our W2, that's our wage statement at the end of the year. Well, the W3 goes with it. It's a summary page of the W2s. Remember that from payroll? Well, Wisconsin also has a summary page on the WT6. It's a WT7. So you have, very similar to what federal requires, Wisconsin requires also, a summary of the WT6. Here again, the WT7 summary has to match or total up to your WT6s throughout the year. Has to. Again, if it doesn't, they'll audit you. Okay? This is big time stuff now. If you're going to make an error, it's going to be here. And I've gotten IRS notices, hey, you made a mistake on your 941, you made a mistake. I never made a mistake on a W2 or W3, thank goodness. Because in a lot of cases, who does that also mess up? Not only the company, but whoever got the W2. So if they filed their tax return, guess what? They're not happy with you. Because now they have to amend their tax return, right? So it's a huge problem. Also, I've seen where on a W2, there's a 0 for Wisconsin withholding. How can that be? Can't. They never set it up in their program. So employees were getting paychecks without Wisconsin withholding on it. Talk about irate employees.
Yeah.
Okay? Because what happens? They were underpaid, right? They went to file their tax returns. What a mess. So, again, this is why we outsource in some cases if you're not comfortable with payroll. And then finally, the 1099 is non-employees, right? Contractors. Oh, I forgot one other one. The 940. See this guy? What's the 940 form for? Remember from payroll we had a whole chapter on it, chapter 5? Federal unemployment. I know I spelled that wrong. What's the wage cap for federal unemployment purposes? It's not 14, it's what? Anybody remember from school? It's 7,000. So federal unemployment, the wage cap is 7. For Wisconsin unemployment, the wage cap is 14. So that's kind of how it rolls up. And we only file the 940 form once. It's an annual report, so that's why we're not covering it. What's nice with the software is you can print out the 3 that I do require. There are tax forms for payroll in the system. So you will use the system to generate a 941, a WT6, and a UCT 101. If you look at Wisconsin here, I know it's very small. The WT7 and the WT6 and the UCT 101 are all listed under Wisconsin. So let's go to the program. I'll show you where this is. So I'm going to Sage. Oh, I can't reach that high. Reports and forms. Where do you think I would go?
report,
I'd go to forms, right?
and then tax form.
And tax forms, good, because we're dealing with a tax form. And then payroll tax forms. So I double click on that. Once I'm here, there's a federal toggle switch and a state toggle switch. Now I know it shows Georgia. You'll have Wisconsin because you're going to be Wisconsin for the case. But the federal form, I'm using 2018. For the federal form 941, you'll have to use 2017 version. Remember, this is an educational software. You're not going to have the latest and greatest form. So 2017, 941 with Schedule B. Once you click on that, it just basically you hit the next button until you get to the form and print it out as a PDF file. So I'm on the federal toggle, and 941 is the report I want you to print out. It'll be a 2017 version, not a 2018. And if you're using the 2017 software, it'll be the 2016 941 report. One other thing I do want to mention, the case is January. What quarter is January? Just first quarter. So once you select the form, make sure you switch to the first quarter. What does Sage do automatically? It switched to the second quarter because what is today is April. We are in the second quarter. Also realize that the case is what year? 2017, right? Your check dates will be 2017, so make sure the year is correct for that report. Otherwise, some students run the report and they say, I have no wages. You probably don't have the right period then, that's all, when you generated the report. So, everybody know where to go? If you have a question, come next week or whenever, just let me know. It's very easy to get to this tax forms. All right, I'm going to cancel this. So, going back to my notes then. A lot of Chapter 10 talks about setup. So, let's go to the setup pages. It's called the Setup Wizard. I actually think QuickBooks does the same thing. starting with page basically 407, all the way through 412. So from 4:07 to 4:12 are going through that setup process. And the setup basically, let's turn to 4:12. Has us enter the general ledger accounts used in payroll. And specifically, the taxes. So if we look at figure 10-7, we've got federal income tax, Social Security, Medicare, state income tax, and state disability insurance. For California, they have a state disability insurance. Wisconsin does not. So you basically can cross that last one out. Now, this is an employee deductions, right? Do you notice in figure 10.7, you're on the employee tab for the defaults? If you go to figure 10.8, what tab are you on now?
Employer.
Employer tab. So look at what taxes are on the employer tab.
They have unemployment. They have
Unemployment
uh,
and which other ones?
federal unemployment.
Federal unemployment, state unemployment.
Yeah.
What are the first two?
We have the
Part one,
same.
Medicare.
Yeah, Social Security and Medicare, right?
Yeah.
So that's the other half. Remember, Social Security and Medicare are matched. California, again, that's what the C is for, has an employee training. You can cross that last one off too. Wisconsin does not have an employee training tax. So basically you have 4 employer taxes. Now, what does account 513 mean? What GL account is that?
Expense, expense,
Payroll
and expense.
tax expense. Payroll tax expense. $513 is only used on the employer taxes, right? So Social Security, Medicare, the half, the unemployment taxes are all employer taxes only. Employer taxes only for 513. Now, as a company, you can decide if you wish to, if you want to see how much you have paid for state unemployment tax, you could change this 513 and call it 514 state unemployment taxes, right? So again, it's by company how you wish to define your income statement. So whenever you're doing a setup, the goal on any setup, whether it's customer, vendor, employee, is you need to know how you want your accounting information displayed. I say displayed or tracked. Right? Always be thinking of what the income statement will look like when you're done with your setups. Now, what do you think 218 is, guys?
The payroll tax.
Yeah, 218 is payroll, taxes, payable. So that's the credit side of the entry, right? So I'm debiting 513, I'm crediting the payroll taxes payable. It's a liability account, 2, look at the number 2, right? Versus 5, it's an expense. So this account is going to be split up. Go to page 415, I'm sorry. What happens to the account numbers now? We have a 220, we have a 222, we have a 224, we have a 226, and then obviously a state disability 228. Why am I splitting those up? They're different taxes, right? So what they're doing in the setup is, hey, we're doing a general, we're picking a general account first, but then further in the setup, you're actually going to break it down into the proper taxes. Where do these accounts appear upon? What statement? The 200s are on what statement?
The balance sheet.
Balance sheet, right? So, as soon as I do a payroll, I need to look at the balance sheet, right? So my federal unemployment, which is account number, oh, that's not there. So for my Social Security, let's just say, account number 222, I should see that 12.4% going into there, right? Both the employee and employer portions. In 224, I should see the 2.9% Medicare going into that account, in that account only. I should see the federal withholding going into the 220 account, withheld from the employee's paycheck. What 3 taxes make up your 941 deposit?
Federal income tax and social and Medicare.
So in a glance, at the end of the quarter, guess what? I know or end of the month, I know exactly what my deposit should be. It should be matching those 3 accounts. That's why we separate them, right? So that I can verify that I'm making the right deposit. If you look at figure 1011 on page 416, we have account 230 and account 232. What are those?
Unemployment.
The unemployment ones. Yep. So they are separate also, right? Because Form 940 requires the federal deposit and UCT 101 requires the state unemployment. So that's what I want you to see when you do your payrolls, is those different accounts and what their purpose is and why they're separate. All right. So the notes then on page 2. I talk about those different accounts. Make sure your GL accounts match the tax. Make sure your GL accounts match the tax. Because again, you want to make that deposit based on those accounts. And then the last part, once the setup is done, obviously you're going to do a payroll. And let me just show you something here. You can pay multiple employees or you can pay one. It doesn't matter. I'm going to go to employees and payroll. And let's just say I'm going to pay myself, right? So I'm going to pay for one employee. It brings up a nice little paycheck scenario. I'm going to pull somebody in here. Duke, he sounds cool. All right, so Duke got 40 hours. I gotta keep it at 40. I don't want to be terrible here. I'm going to put 10 hours of overtime. And what I want to show here, guys, is the wage information's on the left, right? And then on the right, it shows all the deductions, the taxes that were taken out. You see how they're negative numbers? I know it's really hard to see in the back. But the deductions are negative, and then there's some memo stuff for vacation accruals. Skip that. But then it comes down below here, and now they're positive numbers. Those are the taxes that the employer, right, is contributing for Social Security, for Medicare, for federal unemployment, for state unemployment. So when you're doing your payrolls, yes, it's cool to get the net pay, but look at what accounts are affected and understand why some numbers are negative and some are positive. It's really the positive numbers are the tax expenses that the employer contributes. That make sense? Okay, when that person stole from me, how did she steal on her payroll check? What did she do? Do you remember what I told you? She did what? She added hours here.
On her hour?
Yes.
Oh.
So how are you going to stop that from happening to you?
You have to make a password so nobody can log in.
No, I mean, you're going to be doing payroll
Oh.
or somebody that you are working for you.
So you can check, right? When you get a
Yes,
check. you
shouldn't
can-
I have checked? Wouldn't that have been a good idea? Yeah, exactly. Match what? Her time card
Yeah.
to the payroll. Yes.
Where I work, we just got a new system for clocking in,
Yep.
and the employees are responsible for validating their hours. And I think that's really scary.
It is. It is.
We have to validate our own hours at the end of the week, and I'm like, okay.
And that's how she got caught, actually, because there was an employee that said, hey, she had more hours than what she claimed. I don't know how she found out, but she saw that there was more hours on her stuff somehow than what she was actually physically there. So that's how she got caught. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known any different, right? But that brings up another point. So I can change the hours pretty easy, right?
Well, we can change our hours too.
Yes.
Like, we can just be like, oh yeah, I clocked in at 8, but the system said I clocked in at 9, so I'm just gonna change that.
Yep.
And I'm like,
Or
does no one see the problem here? Like, that can be taken advantage
Advantage.
of so easily.
certainly. Or Tom comes in at 8, Shane's not there, but Shane just told Tom, just clock me in. Right? That's pretty easy. That happens a lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
More than
Okay?
More than
So that's
thing.
another fear, right?
Yeah.
If you have a friend that's working with you, now I can clock that person in at the same time I'm coming in and they're fine, right? So that's another concern. Here's my other concern. Okay, here I go. I'm printing the check. Okay? I have Duke, right?
Yes.
Here goes another check. I don't know why I'm getting that message.
You got
It's
to
not
check.
stopping me.
Oh,
Why is it not stopping me?
Because it running, the check, it keep running when you hit pin, that means it seems like they get the paycheck, right?
I can
The
write my,
bill.
I can print out as many checks as I want.
Yeah.
But again, how would I catch that?
They can check your,
The audit trail.
Audit trail is one. What do I get at the end of the month?
The reconciliation.
Bank reconciliation, right? 3 checks to one person in the month when they should only get 1 or 2. That's how you catch them. So guess what? I didn't do that. I had her doing the bank rec. Was that a mistake? Right, it was. Right? We trusted her. So here again, it's very tempting for an employee to do this, is it not? How simple this. This is just like QuickBooks. You can do the same thing in QuickBooks. I can run 10 checks out and I'll be in Mexico before you even know that I have 10 checks in my hand, right? And they're all cleared. So, something to be very, very careful about. Now, Tara brings up a good point. I could print out the checks, right? And then have them in my pocket, and then I can delete the other 3 or 4. It's out of the system, but I have 4 or 5 checks in my hand. How am I going to get caught? The audit trail or bank rec by somebody else other than that person doing the payroll. So here again, because you'll have 4 checks clearing, there's only 1 recorded. Okay, enough about that. Just checking to see if somebody had a question. You do need a check number to save it, so just be aware of that when you pay your employees. Make sure there's a check number on it. The printing process will put a check number automatically. If you leave it, do leave it blank. So you can either put the check number on and save it, that'll save it, or just go to print and that will save it as well with a check number on it. So I mentioned here on page 3, be careful. You can print out as many payroll checks as you want. And then I make the note on page 3. This is, again, check date is the date for posting purposes for payroll. So the IRS, if I write out a check on December 31st, 2019, that's the period it goes in, right? Based on the check date. So that is a test question, please know that. It doesn't matter what the pay ending date is, it's all based on the check date. That's the posting date. And then I talk about the forms again, both federal and state. They're under the payroll tax forms section to locate those reports. So, for case chapter 10 then, what do we need to change? Let's go to page 439. Page 439. First thing I want you to change, letter A here, change California to Wisconsin. Change the CA, so this employer is in the state of Wisconsin, not California. This is right on page 439. And also change the ID numbers. Wisconsin employer ID for the withholding is 999 dash blah, blah, blah. For unemployment, the ID number is 123456 with the dashes, please. Because Wisconsin has a certain format of the number. If I don't have the format right, it won't print the form out to inform you. So use these numbers. I would also like you to use these numbers for your Net Solutions project, because you will be required to generate these reports, these forms, for the Net Solutions project as well. I'm looking for the unemployment and the W-2/6 federal Wisconsin withholding. So we'll use these numbers again in Net Solutions. So make those changes on page 439.
And how about state employer is the same, right?
Yep, state employer is letter B. And state unemployment is letter C. Is that what they say, unemployment? Unemployment ID, yeah. Okay, page 4. On page 440, Wisconsin doesn't have a state disability field. So you will not have to put in account number 228. So you can actually just cross that out. Don't need 228. Okay, you're running your own business. What is the difference between workers' comp and disability insurance? What is workers' comp insurance for?
When they get injured on the job.
When they get injured on the job. So,
They pay it out so they don't get sued.
correct. So this is insurance. The company has to have workers' comp insurance. Has to. The state of Wisconsin requires it. If you have employees, you have to have workers' comp insurance. If you don't, and you have employees, you can get in severe penalties if you do that.
Other states where you don't have to have it.
I doubt it because of such the requirement.
It's such a big skill. thing,
It's such a big risk if you don't. Now, if you have somebody working, an independent contractor working on your company's site, what do you have to have in your hand before you have them step on your property? This includes your personal home as well. They have to have a certificate of insurance. If you do not see that certificate of insurance, do not let them on your property, because if they get hurt on your property, guess whose insurance has to pay? Yours. So if somebody falls off your roof and that company doesn't have a certificate of insurance, it's against your homeowner's policy. So that's the requirement that you should do always. Now, disability is non-work injuries. So what the state of California wants the companies to pay for is if I got hurt in a car accident going to work, disability insurance would kick in. So that's what that's for. But Wisconsin doesn't have that requirement. California is much more liberal, so they have a lot more of those social requirements. I believe that's it for changes. So, there are two cases for Chapter 10, 10.1a and 10.2a. 10.1a covers the setup. That's all it is. 10.2a is the actual payrolls. Watch the dates. You will do two payrolls, one on March 7th, one on March 14th. They tell you the hours for each payroll in the case. And then I've identified the three tax forms that you have to create from Sage. From Sage. Sage does not do the WT, the ST12, the sales tax. That one you do have to fill out. But Sage will give you these three tax forms. Remember with the Sage, it might be 2017 if you're using a 2018 version. And then the Wisconsin ones are just there. You'll see they're pretty straightforward. Watch to be sure first quarter. If you don't see your numbers on the forms, that's probably why. You don't have the right quarter, because it's going to default to second quarter, because we're in April right now. So watch the form.
So this case is gonna be period 3, right? The case 10 we have at the period 3 for March.
Period 3.
For March 1st. For the case 10. We need to do in March, right?
Period March, yes.
Yeah.
Third period, correct. Yep. I think that's it. When you print out these forms, just see where the numbers flow to the general ledger. Right? You should be looking at these forms to make sure they match the good thing I'm stopping now. Any final questions? All right, we'll stop here because the leaf blower is here.